Hello, Master Duel Central. How's it going, guys? So today I want to make a tier list for the hand traps. Everybody knows that Karibo is god tier, busted, cosmic horror. Don't want to mess with it, but there's a lot of really good hand traps in the format, and that changes every format. So here we have our first hand trap tier list. So make sure to like the video and subscribe. We're trying to get to 10,000 subs by the summer, and I think we can get it. All right, I like when the list revolves around the best ones, so I prefer to start with the best cards in the format, or in the list, I guess. And currently, obviously, the best hand traps are Maxx C and Ash Blossom. Now these kind of go together, and it's kind of hard to put one over the other. Some would say Maxx C is better than Ash, and I mean technically that's true, but the thing that's weird about this is if you're playing a combo deck and you have to choose between, you kind of have to run Ash, because negating Maxx C is, I would say, a lot more important than activating Maxx C if you're playing a deck that wants to go first and combo off. So in a way, like, you could argue Ash is better, just in the sense that it negates the best card in the game and that you need to run it to negate it. It's kind of a weird one. I'm really not sure like which one you would say is better. It's kind of like a chicken or the egg situation. This one draws infinitely basically on special summons, and this one stops that from happening. So, you know, both the best. Doesn't really matter which one you put in first, but I will say if you're playing a combo deck and you have to choose, like, you don't have a lot of space, you have to choose one or the other, I would really say definitely play Ash Blossom over Maxx C. But just for the most part, if you can fit both, you want to fit both, you want to run both. They're insane. I know Floowandere's in the format, and this is dead card really against that deck, but still, I still think they're worth running an S tier. That being said, on to the next card, and the next card I would like to talk about is a really interesting one. It's Ghost Ogre. Now, Ghost Ogre is interesting. It's actually got a lot of applicability within this current format. It can pop Runic Fountain, although your opponent can just summon a Hugin, which can be kind of a pain in the ass. Other than that, it can interrupt Moye, it can interrupt Despia plays sometimes. This one's in a decent place. It's like always decent. I'm gonna put it at pretty good. I think it's the epitome of a pretty good hand trap. It's always decent. Sometimes it comes up and does something insane for you, such as like stopping a link climb, but sometimes also it's not great and it like barely does a difference. So, you know, it's still good. It definitely has a lot of applications, just not like the most amazing card. And next up on the list, we have DD Crow. Now, I actually think DD Crow is a very, very solid card this format. I would even go as far as to say that it's kind of like an A tier, like a low-key A tier hand trap. It's got a lot of applications. For one, a lot of people are playing Adamanticators, and DD Crow can just, you know, banish a Block Dragon. We've got the new ban list coming up, and Block Dragon is going to be at 1. So banishing that Block Dragon is going to be huge value, which is going to make DD Crow even better in the upcoming format. On top of that, I mean, you can make Runic draw less, so it's useful in that, like, you know, against that deck. It's not the best, but, you know, at least they were going to draw 3, now they draw 2, you know. So, I mean, hey, that's pretty decent. And it also stops Branded in red, so good bonus. I would say definitely A tier right now in the current format. I would say A tier is a fair spot for DD Crow. Don't sleep on this card. It's actually really good. Next up, we have, okay, this is D-Shifter. Now, Dimensional Shifter, I actually think is still, of course, it's a really solid card. Like, it's a game-winning card a lot of the time, but I don't think it's, like, so broken that it's in, like, S tier. The reason for that is because, well, for one, not every deck can run it. Most of the decks that can run this would be, like, I mean, Floowandere's and maybe Despia. Despia can run it. Thunder Dragons, like, that's about it. There's not, and Metaphys, I guess, but, like, whatever. So I would say D-Shifter is one of those cards, you know, it's not, it can't be run in every deck, and it doesn't have the biggest impact against one of the best decks, which is Despia. It does have decent impact against a lot of good decks, but sometimes it does not much. Like, for instance, with Sword Soul, you can pretty much do your shit with Sword Soul. You know, you can do your Moye stuff, no problem, even under D-Shifter. You can't set up Taya, but is that really the biggest deal in the world? I don't think so. So, in my opinion, while it is, like, definitely great, and probably, like, I'd say better than DD Crow, I wouldn't say it's all the way up in S tier up here. But it's a really amazing A tier hand trap, without a doubt. It's completely busted. For the next one here, one that's kind of similar to DD Crow, we have Skullmeister. Now, Skullmeister is kind of iffy. I mean, it's good in a lot of situations, but I would say it's not that good against the very relevant decks right now. Like, this card negates effects that activate in the graveyard. So against Eldritch, it's good. Against Zombie, it's broken, right? But against decks like Despia, like, what are you going to negate? Like a Tragedy? That doesn't sound very good. Against Runic, you're negating nothing. right? Maybe a Gary. I don't know if that's how it works, but honestly, I just feel like Skullmeister is kind of dead right now. Gonna put it in C tier. It's not a bad card, and you will get moments probably where you're like, oh, I'm so glad I had Skullmeister. but nothing like you know, it's all right. You know. And next up we have Ghost Bell. Now, one of the best things about Ghost Bell is that it can negate Called by the Grave, and honestly that alone would put it in A tier, not to mention it can stop Branded in Red, which is obviously a super huge card, and many other cards. There's a lot of cards that move cards from the graveyard, a lot of interactions with Ghost Bell. It's definitely a bit underrated. There's more and more people playing it, and for good reason. It's really solid. In my opinion, currently, Ghost Bell is at top of A tier for me. That's just how I feel. I mean, some people might say this is a better card, and I guess you could say in some situations it is just like a free game, but I feel like Ghost Bell has more applicability in the current metagame, at least, in my opinion. Now, next up, we have Gamma. Gamma is an insane card, obviously. It's a monster negate that also pops a monster, which makes it sound like S tier. The one thing is, first, you have to run a brick, and two, you can't control any monsters when you activate this card. That makes it kind of iffy. That means like if like you know you can't negate like a Maxx C after your normal summon a monster, for instance. I still think it's a really solid card. I definitely don't think it's just B tier. It's probably like at the bottom of A. It's just a very high risk, high reward kind of card. So for me, that's going to be at the bottom of A tier. The effect is so damn good that it kind of makes it worth all the downsides, but I definitely can't put it in S tier, in my opinion. Next up, we have Red Reboot. Now, Red Reboot is a very powerful card, game-winning card against trap decks, and other than that, it's pretty good. Like, it'll see application in other matchups. Almost every top-tier deck right now has at least one good trap. Even Runic, which is like a spell deck, runs a bunch of floodgates that you can negate with this. Pretty good card overall. Definitely not in A tier in my opinion, however, just because it's so situational, and in some matchups it really doesn't do much for you. Like, sure, negating Blackout is good and everything, but oftentimes that really won't be enough to stop your opponent from interrupting you. It can be, so it is still very good. I would actually put it either over, like, I feel like it's pretty much just even with Ghost Ogre. I'm gonna put it just over though, because it is game winning against trap decks such as Eldritch and Labyrinth, as well as decks that play a bunch of floodgates like Runic like to do recently. So I feel like top of B tier, it is a game-winning card in some moments, but oftentimes it just doesn't really do much of anything. Still a really cool card. And next up, we have Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird is a very cool card. It is game-winning sometimes against Floowandereeze and against Runic, stopping them from doing their just searching endlessly and stuff like that. So it has really good applications in the current format. The thing is, it does not do very much against Despia or Sword Soul. When you're playing against Sword Soul, it's already too late. They've already done their Moye search with Shishao thing before you can even activate Droll and Lockbird. So that doesn't really come up. And against Despia, like, it literally basically does nothing. Maybe actually the fact that it destroys Floowandereeze and Runic does almost make me want to put it at bottom of A tier. I think we're going to do that, but like at the very bottom, it's iffy. Plus there's the fact that there's downsides on your own turn. Like, you can stop yourself from searching too. Interesting card. I think it's still really solid. I think maybe bottom of A, fair enough. It's still really strong. And the next card is Infinite Impermanence. Now, Infinite Impermanence, in my opinion, is an S tier card. It has applicability in almost every matchup. It's good against Runic, good against Despia, because you can negate the Lubellion. You can negate the Hugin in Runic. You can negate the Moye in Sword Soul. Against Adamanticators, it's kind of a dead card, but then again, what hand trap isn't dead against Adamanticators? That just feels like a matchup where you'll try every hand trap in the book and it does nothing. So yeah, honestly, I just feel like it's such a good hand trap. It's also really good against Floowandereeze, and it can't be called by. So I would say, in a world with only one cross out, 3 Imperm looks really nice on your person, I would say it's a really strong card and probably an S tier hand trap at the moment. There's another hand trap that's very similar to it, Effect Veiler, which I think is significantly weaker. This would actually be, for me, at the top of B tier right now. For one, just the fact that you can't use it on your own turn makes it a super dead draw. Imperm, sometimes you'll draw on your own turn against like Sword Soul, let's say, and you can like force out a Baronne, and then that just makes the whole game way more playable. So just the ability of using Imperm on your own turn is really insane. Also, the fact that you can set Imperm to potentially negate a spell or trap like a Floodgate. Like, sometimes I would set Imperm like in the same column as a skill drain, you know, in a slower game with like Eldritch or something, and by the time it comes back to my turn, I can activate my Imperm, negate their skill drain, and go on with my plays. So it has a lot of different applicabilities, whereas Effect Veiler can only negate monsters, it has to target, and it only works on your opponent's turn. It does have upsides, it's definitely still a good card, that's why we're putting it in B tier, because it is not once per turn, so there's the upside if you draw 2, maybe off of Maxx C challenge, like if you activated Maxx C and your opponent's taken the challenge, you can activate 1, and if they called by, then you can chain another one and it still works. So that's pretty good. It's one of the few hand traps that's not once per turn. But I don't know. That's just my opinion though, guys. I think it's just a B tier card at the moment, at least. It's still really solid. And honestly, one thing that it has going for it is not a lot of people are running it. So if you run a Veiler, a lot of the time when your opponent has Crossout Designator, they're not actually going to have the Veiler in deck for it. So, you know, it has upsides. It's still really solid. It's a good card. I think Veiler right here is a fair spot, but you might want to put it higher. Let me know in the comments. Now, next up, we have Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. Now, you guys probably have never seen this card in Master Duel or haven't in a very long time. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. To me, this is like a C tier card. The thing is, this card used to be good in Master Duel during like Halcyon format. If you weren't playing Halcyon, you could put like, you know, the Auroradon in your extra deck or the Halka Fibrax or something, and you could just straight up go like Winter Cherries, banish Halk or banish Auroradon, and just not have to think about it, right? So that was kind of cool, but right now there's just too much variety, too many good decks. A lot of them don't even care about their extra deck, and the ones that do have such a varied package for the most part that this is only going to end up being really good against maybe Sword Soul, and I really can't think of another deck this is going to be amazing against. Maybe Despia, you can get rid of Mirror Jade, but it's not like Despia can't play without Mirror Jade, you know? So I don't know, I think like C tier, bottom of C tier, to be honest. This card is just, in my opinion, kind of unplayable in a format that is this varied. Next up, we have Nibiru. And you guys probably know, if you watch my short, how I feel about this card. I just made a short on this. I don't think Nibiru is very playable this format. I would put Nibiru at the top of C tier. It's still, like, in my opinion, better than Skull Meister or Ghost Reaper. Like, honestly, I would almost make a tier under here that just says, like, bad. Because I don't think either of these cards are bad. I think, like, I say in my title of my short, like, Nibiru is trash, but obviously, like, it's not actually trash. Like, it has applicabilities, it can be good, it has applications, you can win games with it. The thing about Nibiru is, against the meta decks, I feel like a lot of the time it just doesn't really work. If you're playing against a combo deck, oftentimes they have a negate before their 5th summon. Like Adamanticators, sure, they summon a bunch, but before their 5th summon, you best believe they have a Kawaki Mary Guardian like 90% of the time, right? So your Nibiru's dead in that case. Most people who play Despia, they don't do the funny shit with Masquerade. They'll just set up Mirror Jade with a Branded in red, and they're going to go Chimera Mirror Jade on your turn, and you're not going to get to Nibiru that board either. Floowandery is just going to pass with an M-Pen and a set trap, and probably going to win the game because you have this dead Nibiru in your hand doing nothing. So I actually think Nibiru is quite bad right now. Same goes for Runic. Obviously, it's useless against Runic. It can be pretty good against Sword Soul. Like, sometimes they'll have Baron before, but oftentimes they don't. So yeah, that's what I would say for this one. Honestly, it's still like, you know, it'll win you games. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, Nibiru will win you games, but it's not going to win you as many, and oftentimes you're going to have it in your hand and you'll be like, wow, this is the biggest break I've ever drawn in my life. And for the final two cards here, we have Chaos Hunter and Lancia. They're both cards meant to like counter Runic and just counter banishing in general. There's a lot of Floowanderies going around as well as Runic, which are both decks that heavily focus on banishing. If you're playing Chaos Hunter, it means you're really focusing on the Runics, because Chaos Hunter does turn off Runics pretty much completely. Runic becomes somewhat unplayable when Chaos Hunter hits the field. Basically, when a monster, if a monster special summoned, you can summon this card from your hand, and then your opponent cannot banish cards while this card is face up on the field, which means they basically can't activate any Runic spells. That's insane, right? And that makes this card really, really solid. The thing is, like, it's also kind of dead against Floowanderies, which also loves to do banishing. So I'm just going to put it at top of B. That's just, I don't like the idea that you're running this anti-banishing card and you're playing against this deck that loves banishing and you can't even use your Chaos Hunter. You know, like, it's useless. So, because it only triggers on special summon. So for that reason, in my opinion, this is only at top of B tier. Right now, it is really good because you see a lot of Runic going around, and it's also got applications against other matchups such as Despia. Like, this is really good against Despia, and you know, it's a good card. I just don't think it's on that level. I think Lancia is a bit better. I still think Lancia has its downsides. The thing is, a lot of decks want to banish, so you don't see Lancia as much as you'd think, just because when people run Lancia, that means they can't banish when they activate it on their own turn, let's say. So if you're playing Runic against me and I'm playing Dinos, I'm looking kind of stupid if I activate Lancia, because then I can't activate my double evolution pill, I can't use Misk in my grave, you know, things like that. So for that reason, a lot of decks that want to banish don't run Lancia, even though they do want to stop Runic. So while I do think it's better because at least it works against Floowandereeze, I don't think it's much better. Honestly, I'm going to put it right under Droll because I do think Droll does a better job of stopping Runic and Floowandereeze, while also having a better matchup spread in general and applicability in other matchups as well. So yeah, it's looking like a bit of a pyramid here. A lot of A tier cards for me. But that's basically my tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you disagree, if you agree, if you think I'm tripping, if you think I'm with it. And, you know, drop a like, drop a comment. I appreciate the support. Huge shout out to my UCT tier members. That would be Raptor, Boggerman for 20, Dad Dude, Joey, Hudaman, me, Right Toast, as well as Brett Webster. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support again. And that's going to be it for me. All right, peace.